collect even more tax for the tax man. Welcome to Simplified Sparky Marketing. This podcast is going to be about GST. Now, if you're a seasoned business owner, you're registered for GST and you understand the ins and outs of it, I would advise you to go to any other podcast, go back to the start of the podcast. There's loads of other podcasts there. This podcast has been particularly made due to one of my members, Aidan. Thank you very much for the inspiration for the podcast episode. That common sense isn't so common and basic knowledge isn't so basic. And I think that's where I have to take a step back sometimes and think that people know everything. And I think that's obviously the purpose of the podcast, and why you listen to the podcast is to get educated in your electrical business. And one huge thing that I've noticed is newbie businesses, starting fresh, starting wet behind the ears, are not registering for GST, which I disagree with, which I'll get into in the podcast. But in this podcast, I'm just going to purely speak about GST, what it is, what a BAS is, why I think you should register from the absolute get-go of starting your electrical business, not wait until the threshold. What GST is goods and services tax. That's what it stands for. It's the same as VAT in the UK or Ireland, which is value added tax. What this is it is an additional tax to everything that you sell essentially or buy. So when you buy something, that person will be registered for GST. So they will have charged it, and when you sell something, you charge it. So how it operates is a balance. Let's break down GST. When you charge an invoice for your electrical work, let's say it is $1,000 plus GST, which would be $1,100. So the 10% onto $1,000 is $1,100. Now what's happened is you submit that invoice, and let's say you're working directly for a business. They can then claim that $100 because you're GST registered. And vice versa, you buy a product, let's just say it's a tool, and it's $1,100. So that is $100 of GST, $1,000 of the price of the item. So what happens is, in that instance, you have invoiced out $1,100 and you have received $1,100. Now you've spent that $1,100. So it basically passes the GST around. Why I am adamant that startup businesses should register for GST from the get-go is this is a big expenditure zone when you start up. You buy your vehicle, you might be buying new tires for it, you might be shelving the van, you might be putting racks on it, all the stock you buy from the suppliers. All of this shit is inclusive of GST. So you're essentially paying 10% more than you should when you start the business. But I think people hesitate because they think it's just big boy stuff, but it's not. It's essential stuff for your business. And there's a threshold that you have to meet, and that is $75,000 turnover. That's turnover, not profit. That once you are at 74 grand and you're about to send the next invoice, you have to go off to the accountant in a panic, a rush, sort out your GST, then you register. It's just not setting yourself up for success from the get-go. Registering your electrical business for GST is actually free. So if you're pretty on the ball with all that kind of stuff with the ATO and you can log in or give them a call and get it all sorted, you can do it yourself. Absolutely, and it's free. But I would advise using an accountant or your accountant to do this, because it's just bulletproof that everything's done correctly. You're registered, you're good to go. All of this can probably be done within 1 to 2 days. Shoot for the stars. If you want to have a successful electrical business, you should be doing well over that 75 grand mark in the first year, way over that. So when you register your business, I recommend a company structure or a trust structure. Speak with your accountant on all of this, a good accountant, because the wrong accountant's going to lead you astray. Get out of the sole trader, register as a company and register for GST. Register as a company under a trust or register as a company PTY Limited. You want to be doing this from the get-go because, as I said, when you start the business, that's when you're spending a lot of money getting set up. On startup, this seems amazing that you're able to buy stuff at 10% cheaper and you lodge a claim and you're actually getting money back. You never want to be seeing that money back when you start running your business properly. That's a bad thing, because you want to be paying GST, because the more GST and tax you pay, the more successful your business is. So don't try and look at this as what can I whittle down or what can I claim this 10% on now. It will balance out. And as I mentioned earlier, it's just like going to the suppliers, buying your PowerPoints, lights, switches, smoke alarms, switchboards. All of that is inclusive of 10% GST. So essentially you're getting 10% additional to whatever your supplier is giving. Even stuff like your uniforms, your logo, all of that stuff, you can claim the GST on that, which is 10% of everything. Now, with that as well, if you are buying a product or you've got a subscription to something specific that may be from overseas, like America, UK, Ireland, etc., you can't claim the GST on an international item. So let's say, for instance, you go to eBay and you buy some sort of specific tool and it gets shipped in from the States. You cannot claim the GST on that because they're not GST registered. So that's just a little tip on that. When you are registered for GST, you have got to submit a BAS, usually every quarter. So that's a business activity statement is what that stands for. And what that is you will basically log the GST that you've charged, the GST that you've received, and your wages tax. So your PAYG, which is the tax that you get in your wages, that will go towards your tax bill, and you will also have your GST that you've collected and GST that you've invoiced for. So that all balances each other out. As I spoke about earlier, hypothetically, if you buy a vehicle for, let's just say it's 20 grand, it's 22 grand inclusive of GST, but you end up paying the dealer 22 grand and you're not registered for GST. You can't claim that you've just paid him 22 grand. And if you were registered for GST, that vehicle would have cost you 20 grand and you would have got the 2 grand back in tax. So this is the importance of getting registered up front. And this was how it all came about. Was Aidan has jumped on board with me inside the mentorship, and I was like, are you registered for GST? And he's like, no. And I said, you should totally register for GST because you will save 10% per month by registering for GST. So he's gone, he's spoken with his accountant, and now he's registered for GST. So hopefully this all makes sense of why you should register from the get-go. You can and awe and wait and push it out until you reach the 75 grand. But another thing that's going to go against you is, let's say hypothetically you've got client base, or you start doing work for somebody that sends you a lot of work. They might own a few properties. Then all of a sudden you register for GST after you've been doing the work. You now have to start charging them GST, or else worse again, you're afraid to charge the GST and you absorb a 10% loss, which is fatal in your electrical business to be taking that much of a hit. There's just so many pros to registering from GST. The only con I can see with registering for GST is having to do your BAS every quarter. Now that's easy. It's literally a few clicks of a button if you've got the right software in place, such as Xero. And this is something that you should speak with your accountant about. Make sure you wiggle it in as part of your package. With my accountant, we work off a subscription model. So what happens there is I pay him a fixed amount every month. That is inclusive of lodging the BAS every quarter and doing the tax return personally and for the companies at the end of financial year. So make sure you have got this set up with your accountant, that they don't pull a sneaky on you when you are doing your BAS every quarter and spring it on you. Get your pricing fixed in up front so you know what's in store for you. This is not financial advice. This is just an electrician talking about experience. If you want financial advice around this, speak to your accountant and get the right advice on what you should do. This is, as I said, just experience and my belief in what you should do. All the links you need to get me are in the description below.